Most people think modal verbs are just small helper words like can, must, or should. But the truth is that they are one of the most powerful tools in the English language. They do not simply modify verbs, they shape meaning, express intention, emotion, authority, possibility, and even uncertainty. Whether you want to sound confident, polite, professional, or persuasive, modal verbs are the key. In this video, you will finally understand how to use them in real life, not just in theory. We are going deep, step by step, through every important modal with clear logic and practical examples you'll actually use. So stay with me until the end, because this guide was designed not only to teach you grammar, but to transform the way you communicate in English forever. Let's unlock the real power behind modal verbs starting right now.
Before we dive into each modal verb individually, it is important to understand what modal verbs truly are and how they work grammatically. Modal verbs are a special category of auxiliary verbs that express attitudes such as ability, permission, obligation, advice, and possibility. Unlike normal verbs, modals never change form. They do not take s, ed, or ing endings, and they are always followed by the base form of the main verb, also known as the bare infinitive without to. For example, we say she can drive and not she cans drives. They are simple in structure but extremely rich in meaning. That is why mastering modal verbs is a major milestone for learners moving from basic to real intermediate and advanced communication. One of the most important things to understand about modal verbs is that they do not indicate time by themselves. Instead of expressing past, present, or future, they express intention, mood, or possibility. The time reference is usually understood through context or with the help of additional time words. For example, I can visit you tomorrow refers to the future, while I can speak English refers to a general ability in the present. Both sentences use the same modal, but the time is determined by context. This flexibility is what allows modal verbs to adapt to so many situations without changing form. All modal verbs follow three essential sentence patterns: affirmative, negative, and interrogative. The affirmative structure is subject plus modal plus base verb, as in they might come later. For the negative, we simply add not after the modal. She should not worry. Most modal verbs also have contractions in spoken English, such as shouldn't, can't, and won't. For questions, we invert the order and begin with the modal. Can you help me? Or would you like some tea? Notice how simple the structure is. No auxiliary do, does, did is needed when using modal verbs in questions or negatives. Another essential feature of modal verbs is that they often carry different degrees of strength in meaning. For example, must expresses a strong sense of obligation, while should expresses a weaker suggestion or recommendation. Similarly, might expresses a lower degree of possibility than may. These small differences completely change how your message is received by native speakers.
That is why modal verbs are so valuable. They allow you to adjust your tone. You can sound firm, polite, uncertain, formal, or casual, depending on the modal you choose. Modal verbs are also unique because they allow speakers to avoid direct statements and express ideas in a softer or more indirect way. This is especially important in English, which is a language that values politeness and clarity in communication. Saying, "Could you open the window?" sounds much more polite than "open the window." Likewise, "You might want to check this again" sounds softer and more constructive than "this is wrong." With modals, you can control the emotional impact of your message effortlessly. Before we move forward into specific modal verbs like can, could, may, and might, here is a quick exercise to activate your understanding. Try to feel the intention behind each sentence. "You must finish this today" expresses strong obligation. "You should finish this today" expresses advice. "You could finish this today" suggests a possibility or option. "You might finish this today" expresses a weaker possibility. Notice how the meaning changes without changing the main verb. This is the transformational power of modal verbs, and by the end of this guide, you will know exactly how to use them with precision in real conversations. Can is the most basic and versatile modal verb, most commonly used to express ability in the present. When someone says, "I can swim," or "she can speak French," the sentence communicates a skill or natural capability. Can is also frequently used to express informal permission, such as, "Can I go now?" In many everyday conversations, can replaces may in casual speech, especially in American English. Another important use is to talk about possibility based on real facts, like "It can get cold here at night." Structurally, can is simple because it follows the standard modal rules. It never changes form and is always followed by a base verb without to. To form questions, simply invert the subject and the modal. "Can you help me?" For negatives, add not, often contracted to can't. Mastering can is essential because it appears in almost every English conversation and sets the foundation for understanding other modal verbs. Could is the past form of can, but in reality, it has many more uses than simply expressing past ability. Yes, it can refer to something someone was able to do, like, "When I was younger, I could run faster." But could is also used to make polite requests. Compared to can, could sounds softer and more polite. "Could you close the door, please?" It is also used to talk about future possibilities when uncertainty is involved, such as, "It could rain later." Another important use is in suggestions, like, "We could try a different approach." Could also works in hypothetical situations, especially when used together with if clauses, as in, "If I had more time, I could learn another language." Because could is gentle and flexible, it is common in both spoken and written English. May is one of the most misunderstood modal verbs by English learners because its meaning changes depending on context. The two core functions of may are permission and possibility, but both are used differently from can and could. When expressing permission, may is more formal than can. May I come in is something you would hear in a polite or respectful context, perhaps at school or in a formal meeting. When expressing possibility, may indicates a realistic chance that something will happen. She may join us later. Compared to might, may expresses a slightly stronger possibility. In negative form, may not does not use contractions in standard English. Unlike other modals, may has no past form in normal grammar, so learners must express past meaning using was allowed to or might have.
Might is closely related to may and is often used in similar contexts, but it carries a weaker or more uncertain tone. If someone says it might snow tonight, they are expressing a lower probability than with it may snow tonight. Because might sounds more cautious, it is frequently used in speculation or when the speaker does not want to sound too direct. Might is also useful in giving suggestions politely, as in, you might want to check your email. Another interesting feature is that might is often used in hypothetical conditions similar to could, especially when combined with if clauses. However, native speakers rarely use might to ask for permission today, even though grammatically it is allowed. Instead, might survives strongly as the modal of uncertainty and gentle advice.
Although can, could, may, and might are often taught separately, they work best when understood in comparison. For example, imagine you are trying to express possibility in different strengths. It might rain suggests a very small chance. It may rain expresses a reasonable possibility. And it could rain suggests a realistic option depending on conditions. These words allow you to control how strongly you want to express ideas. The same happens with requests. Can you help me is neutral and common, while could you help me sounds polite and respectful. Using these modal verbs correctly instantly makes your English sound more natural and emotionally intelligent. Learners must also be careful to avoid common errors with these modals. One frequent mistake is adding to after modal verbs, such as saying she can to sing instead of she can sing. Another error is using do or does in questions with modals, like do can you help me instead of can you help me? It is also incorrect to say he cans or she coulds because modal verbs do not take s in the third person. Other errors involve confusing permission and possibility, especially with may and can. Understanding the differences in meaning and structure helps avoid misunderstandings and awkward sentences. To internalize these modal verbs, let's apply them in short, realistic contexts. Imagine you are making weekend plans with a friend. You say, "We could go to the beach if the weather is good." Your friend answers, "It might be crowded, but we can leave early to avoid traffic." Later, you ask your parents for permission. "Mom, may I borrow the car?" In just a few lines, you used could for a suggestion, might for possibility, can for ability, and may for formal permission. Practicing with natural scenarios like this helps your brain connect modal verbs with real communication rather than only grammar rules. Must is one of the strongest modal verbs in English, and it expresses a powerful sense of obligation or necessity. When you say, "You must study for your exam," you are not giving a suggestion. You are giving a strong command or expressing an unavoidable need. Must is also used when the speaker is personally convinced of something based on logic or evidence, such as, "You must be tired after working all day." In this case, must does not express obligation, but rather a logical conclusion. It is essential to understand this double function. Must can either impose strong obligation or express a confident assumption. However, must has no true past form, so in the past we replace it with had to when talking about obligation, as in, "I had to go to school yesterday." Have to is often confused with must, but while both communicate obligation, they are not always interchangeable. Must expresses an obligation that comes from the speaker, something internal or personal. In contrast, have to expresses an external obligation, something that comes from rules, laws, or other people. For example, a teacher might say, "You must pay attention," expressing personal authority. But if we say, "I have to pay taxes," the obligation comes from the government, not from personal opinion. In pronunciation, have to is usually reduced in fast-spoken English to hafta, especially in informal contexts. The negative form, must not, has a completely different meaning from do not have to, so learners must be careful to avoid confusion. Must not, or mustn't, does not express lack of obligation, but prohibition. If you say, "You mustn't touch that," you are saying it is not allowed. However, do not have to means something is optional, not prohibited. For example, "You don't have to come early" means it is not necessary, but still allowed. These nuances are important because using mustn't incorrectly can make sentences sound more aggressive or strict than intended. Meanwhile, have got to is an informal alternative to have to, especially in British English, as in, "I've got to leave now." Understanding these variations allows learners to choose the appropriate tone for every situation. Should is used to give advice, recommendations, and opinions. It is less forceful than must and have to. For example, "You should sleep earlier" sounds like helpful advice, while "you must sleep earlier" sounds like a strict order. Should is also used to express expectation, as in, "The bus should arrive soon," meaning that something is likely or expected, but not guaranteed. The negative form, should not, or shouldn't, expresses that something is not a good idea. Should is very common in everyday communication because people often share opinions, suggestions, and guidance in conversations. Its polite tone makes it perfect for giving advice without sounding rude. Ought to is another modal verb that expresses advice similar to should, but it sounds slightly more formal. Although it appears less often in spoken English, it is still correct and commonly used in written language or polite speech. For example, you ought to apologize means nearly the same as you should apologize. The main difference is that ought to often carries a stronger moral sense, suggesting what is right or responsible. Unlike other modals, ought is always followed by to before the base verb. In negative and question forms, native speakers often avoid complicated structures like oughtn't he to call and instead prefer using should. Let's look at how these modal verbs work together in real contexts. Imagine a work situation. You must attend tomorrow's meeting means attendance is not optional. If your manager says you have to submit the report today, the obligation comes from workplace rules. A colleague might say, you should check your email, giving friendly advice. Meanwhile, someone could express a moral obligation by saying you ought to be honest with the team. Each modal verb delivers a specific tone and level of urgency. These differences affect how your message is received, making modal verbs powerful tools in both professional and personal communication. To better understand the emotional impact of each modal, compare these sentences. You must stop smoking sounds strict and serious. You have to stop smoking sounds like a necessary change. You should stop smoking sounds like caring advice. And you ought to stop smoking sounds like moral responsibility. The main idea is the same, but the emotional tone changes based on the modal verb. Mastering these subtleties will help you communicate more naturally and more persuasively. The more you practice choosing the right modal in the right situation, the more fluent and confident your English will become. Would is one of the most flexible and expressive modal verbs in English, and its meaning depends entirely on the context in which it is used. One of its most common uses is to talk about polite offers and invitations. Sentences like, "Would you like some coffee?" or "Would you like to join us?" sound friendly and respectful. Compared to will, which sounds more direct, would softens the tone and makes the sentence sound more considerate. That is why would is often preferred in situations where polite communication matters, such as customer service, job interviews, or formal interactions. It gives you social elegance in English and allows you to express yourself with diplomacy. Would is also essential for forming conditional sentences, especially the second and third conditionals, which talk about unreal or imaginary situations. For example, in the sentence, "If I had more time, I would learn another language," the speaker imagines something hypothetical, not real. Similarly, "If she had called me, I would have helped," expresses regret about something that did not happen in the past. In both cases, would expresses outcomes that depend on conditions. This makes would a fundamental part of deeper English communication because it helps express thoughts, regrets, possibilities, and possibilities in more sophisticated ways. Would can also express preferences, often using structures like would rather and would prefer. For example, I would rather stay home tonight means you prefer staying home instead of going out. In everyday speech, this is often contracted to I'd rather. Another useful structure is would you rather, which is used to ask about choices, often in casual conversation games. For instance, would you rather travel to the mountains or the beach? These expressions are extremely common in natural English and help learners express personal opinions clearly. Another interesting use of would is to talk about past habits or repeated actions in the past. Just like used to, would can describe actions that happened regularly but no longer do. For example, when I was a child, I would visit my grandparents every summer. Here, would does not express the future, but rather nostalgic memories. However, unlike used to, would cannot describe past states, only repeated actions. So, while you can say, I used to live in Brazil, you cannot say, I would live in Brazil to mean the same thing. This difference is subtle but important for precise communication. Would is also frequently used to make polite requests or show willingness. For example, would you help me with this is more polite than will you help me with this. Meanwhile, I would love to sounds warm and enthusiastic when accepting invitations, as in, I would love to join you. The modal would reduces the intensity of a message without changing its meaning, which makes it perfect for avoiding misunderstandings. It is particularly useful for English learners who want to improve their spoken fluency and avoid sounding rude without meaning to. There is also a special structure with would that expresses annoyance or complaining about repeated behavior. Would plus always. For example, he would always forget his keys means he had an annoying habit in the past. This use of would adds emotion to the sentence and implies frustration. It helps speakers describe not just what happened, but how they felt about it. This emotional layer is part of fluent expression in English and is an advanced technique that learners can start applying even at intermediate levels. In addition, would appears in reported speech, when we report what someone said indirectly. For example, if someone originally said, I will call you later, in reported speech, we say, he said he would call me later. Here, would is simply the reported form of will. This use is extremely common in storytelling, news, and everyday conversations. Understanding how to use would in reported speech allows you to retell information naturally, which is essential for real-world communication. Combining all its uses, would is not just a modal verb, but a communication tool that lets you express courtesy, imagination, preference, memory, emotion, and storytelling. To master would, you must focus not only on grammar rules, but also on feeling the intention behind each use. Ask yourself, am I being polite, talking about the past, imagining something unreal, or expressing preference? When the intention is clear, choosing the correct structure becomes much easier. With practice, would becomes a natural part of your English voice and greatly expands your expressive power.
Modal verbs become even more powerful when combined with the perfect form, using have plus past participle. This structure allows you to express opinions about the past, regrets, missed opportunities, criticism, and logical conclusions. These forms are essential for real communication because they express complex thoughts and emotions. While many learners understand modal verbs in the present, mastery truly begins when you can use them confidently to discuss past situations. These structures may look complex at first, but once you understand the logic behind them, they become simple and natural.
Could have is used to talk about past possibilities that did not happen. It often expresses missed opportunities or abilities someone had but did not use. For example, I could have studied harder means the opportunity was there, but the person did not take it. In another example, they could have won the game suggests that victory was possible, but something prevented it. However, could have can also be neutral, not always emotional. You could have called me can sound like a gentle reminder or criticism, depending on tone. This modal is extremely common in daily conversations and storytelling.
Should have is one of the most emotional modal structures because it expresses regret, criticism, or judgment about a past action. When someone says, I should have told the truth, they feel regret for not doing something they believe was right. Similarly, you should have been more careful expresses strong advice about the past or criticism. This structure is powerful because it combines logic and emotion, and it is used frequently in conversations dealing with lessons learned or mistakes. Understanding this modal helps you express deep reflections clearly in English. Would have is used to talk about unreal past situations, things that could have happened under different conditions. For example, I would have helped you if I had known expresses a past willingness blocked by circumstances. This structure often appears in the third conditional and is useful when explaining decisions, regrets, and hypothetical outcomes. It also helps express politeness when declining invitations indirectly. For example, I would have gone, but I was sick sounds more considerate than simply saying I didn't go. This modal adds emotional nuance to communication. Might have expresses a possibility about the past, often when the speaker is uncertain. For example, she might have taken the wrong train suggests a possible explanation, but not a sure one. This modal is useful for speculation and avoiding assumptions. It also allows speakers to discuss sensitive topics gently without sounding accusatory. For instance, you might have misunderstood me is much softer than you misunderstood me. Mastering this form allows your English to become more diplomatic and precise. Must have is used to express a logical conclusion about the past. When you say, he must have forgotten the meeting, you are making a strong assumption based on evidence, not expressing obligation.
This use of must is common and often misunderstood by learners who associate must only with rules. In reality, must has a second identity as the modal of logical deduction. It helps you sound certain without stating absolute facts. For example, they must have left already sounds confident and logical based on the situation. These modal perfect forms are especially common in storytelling, explanations, and apologies. Imagine a conversation after an event. We could have arrived earlier, but the traffic was terrible. We should have checked the map. You must have been waiting for a long time. You might have thought we forgot about you, but we didn't. We would have called, but our phones died. In just a few lines, every advanced modal appears naturally. This shows how useful they are in real life. Although these structures look long, pronunciation in natural English often reduces them. Could have becomes could've. Should have becomes should've. Would have becomes would've. Might have becomes might've. And must have becomes must've. In fast speech, have may even sound like or disappear completely. I should have gone or I should have gone. Understanding these reductions will greatly improve your listening skills and make your speech sound more natural. With practice, you will begin to feel the emotional weight and meaning each modal carries. Mastering them will give you complete control over time, intention, and tone in English. Every modal verb carries meaning far beyond grammar rules. They shape how you express ideas, emotions, opinions, possibilities, obligations, and regrets. In this guide, you did more than study modal verbs. You unlocked one of the foundations of natural English communication. You learned how to express ability with can, possibility with might and could, permission with may, obligation with must and have to, advice with should, hypotheses with would, and even emotional reflections about the past using advanced forms like could have, should have, would have, might have. These are not just structures, they are tools to express yourself with precision, clarity, and confidence in any situation, from casual conversations to academic or professional English. If you practice what you learned here and apply it in real sentences, your English will immediately sound more natural and intelligent. Before you leave this video, make a commitment with yourself. Do not just watch, practice. Choose a few modal verbs and write your own sentences today. Use them when texting, thinking aloud, or speaking with someone. Repetition is what turns knowledge into fluency. If this guide helped you finally understand modal verbs in a clear and logical way, then do one simple thing now. Support this work. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next lessons. And tell me in the comments which modal verb you struggle with the most. I read every message and use your comments to build new videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.